Chapter 8. The suns were beginning to set as Anakin stood outside the entry dome of the Lars family homestead. Owen had offered a swoop bike to Anakin, and the bike was now parked in the air a short distance from the dome. I shouldn't be angry with Owen and Clegg for giving up, Anakin thought. They care for my mother, but they're only human. They can only do so much. Padme emerged from the entry dome and went to Anakin. He knew she wanted to help, but he also knew there wasn't any way he was going to risk her life any more than he already had. You're going to have to stay here, he said. These are good people, Padme. You'll be safe. Anakin, they embraced. Anakin almost wished he could have frozen that moment just to keep Padme forever close to him. But darkness was coming up fast, and his mother was still out there somewhere. She's alive, he felt. I know she is. Releasing himself from Padme's arms, Anakin walked to the swoop bike. I won't be long, he said. He swung himself onto the bike, fired the engine, and tore off across the desert floor. With the hot wind whipping in his robe, Anakin crossed into the Jundland Waste, where Tusken Raiders were known to hide and hunt among the towering rock formations. He didn't wonder why the Tuskens had taken his mother, or why they hadn't killed her if they had the other farmers. For all he knew, the Tuskens were acting out some profane ritual. Their motives were not his concern. He just wanted his mother back. He also wanted her back in one piece. He thought about what the Tuskens had done to Klieg Lars, and he launched the bike faster over the wastes. He was about 150 kilometers from the Lars homestead when he sighted the tall silhouettes of sandcrawlers against the twilight sky. It was a Jawa camp. Although Jawas feared Tusken Raiders as much as anyone on Tatooine, Anakin knew the small, glowing-eyed scavengers would be more willing to provide information if he gave something in return. In exchange for a multi-tool and a portable scanner that he found in his borrowed bike's pannier, the Jawas told him he should head east to find a Tusken camp. Tatooine's suns had long since set, and the moons hung low over the horizon when Anakin saw the cluster of flickering campfires at the bottom of Deep Valley. Leaving the swoop bike on the edge of a high cliff, he kept to the shadows as he ventured down into the valley and moved silently toward the camp. The camp consisted of about 24 tents made of skins and salvaged bits of wood from Tatooine's long-dead forests. 2 Tuskens stood a short distance from one tent, guarding it. Anakin reached out with a force and sensed his mother was inside. Without drawing any attention to himself, he maneuvered around to the back of the tent, used his lightsaber to get a hole through the taut skin covering, and stepped inside. Anakin found his mother at the center of the tent, tied to a frame made of thin wooden sticks. A small fire burned in a nearby pot and cast warm, wicked shadows across the tent walls. Shmi wasn't moving. Scared as a child, Anakin said, "Mom?" No response. He could see from the dried blood on her face and arms that she'd been terribly beaten. "Mom?" Still no response. She was barely alive. She moaned as he slipped her wrists free from the leather strips that had bound her to the frame. He gently lowered her to the ground, cradling her upper body in his arms. "Mom?" Shmi's bruised eyelids fluttered open, and she struggled to focus on Anakin's face. "Annie?" she muttered. "Is it you?" "I'm here, Mom," he said. "You're safe." "Annie? Annie?" She seemed confused, as if she were trying to figure out whether he really was there. Then incredibly, she managed to smile at him. "Oh, you look so handsome." She brushed her hand against his face, and he kissed her open palm. "My son. Oh, my grown-up son. I'm so proud of you, Annie." Anakin swallowed hard and felt the sting of tears in his eyes as he said, "I missed you." "Now I am complete," Shmi said. "I love you." Anakin tensed as her voice cut off. "Stay with me, Mom. Everything..." He wanted to tell her that everything was going to be fine, and he wanted to tell her so much more. But before he could say anything, Shmi said again, "I love..." Then her eyes closed and her head fell back. She died in his arms. Anakin sat there in stunned silence, just holding his mother. "If I got here sooner, I could have saved her." He pushed his finger through Shmi's matted hair. "I won't leave her here. I have to get her back to the speeder bike. But those Tusken guards..." He remembered the Tusken he had encountered when he was a boy. "I saved his life." Earlier, Anakin hadn't questioned the Tusken's motives. Now he wondered if they would have taken his mother if they'd known that her son had once saved one of their own. Or is this how Tuskens say thank you? He quickly speculated whether the Tuskens he'd rescued might still He'd still be alive, possibly in this very camp. I should have let him die. I should have. He thought of how the Tuskens had taken his mother, imagining what she had endured in the past month. Why would they do this? How could anyone do this? The answer came to him from the darkest reaches of his own heart. They did this because they wanted to. They did this because they could. As his grief transformed into anger, he knew exactly how he was going to dispose of the Tusken guards. Temporarily leaving his mother's corpse, Anakin Skywalker stepped outside the tent and reactivated his lightsaber. He didn't stop with the guards. When Anakin arrived back at the Lars homestead with his mother's blanket-wrapped body, Klieg, Lars, Owen, Beru, Padme, and C-3PO emerged from the entry dome. They watched in silence as he lifted his dead mother from the bike and carried her toward the dome's doorway. Anakin was in no mood to talk, and he had reconsidered his assessment that the Lars family was made up of good people. What's the advantage of being good if you're weak? His grim, scowling expression locked onto Klieg Lars, who lowered his gaze. Perhaps you're wishing you hadn't given up on her so soon? With a breaking stride, Anakin redirected his glare at Owen and Beru. Maybe my mother never told you about how to be prepared to take care of things. Anakin didn't even look at Padme or the protocol droid as he descended with his mother into the underground dwelling. Later, Anakin was standing at a workbench in the homestead garage, repairing a part from the swoop bike when Padme entered carrying a tray of food. She said, "I brought you something. Are you hungry?" Anakin continued to examine the bike part, moving slowly, as if he were slightly dazed. "The shifter broke," he said. "Life seems so much simpler when you're fixing things. I'm good at fixing things. Always was. But I couldn't." He stopped working and looked at Padme. "Why'd she have to die? Why couldn't I save her? I know I could have." He turned away, looking into a dark corner of the cluttered garage. His rage had momentarily given way to grief. "Sometimes there are things no one can fix," Padme said. "You're not all-powerful, Annie." I should be," he snarled back at her, causing Padme to flinch. "Someday I will be," he continued. "I will be the most powerful Jedi ever, I promise you. I will even learn to stop people from dying." Padme just stood there, confused and alarmed by his words. "Anakin, it's all Obi-Wan's fault. He's jealous. He's holding me back." He flung a wrench across the garage. It smashed against the wall and clattered to the floor. "What's wrong, Annie?" Still avoiding her gaze, Anakin tried to calm his voice as he said, I killed them. I killed them all. They're dead. Every single one of them." He turned slowly to face Padme, revealing the tears streaming down his face. "And not just the men, but the women and the children too. They're like animals, and I slaughtered them like animals." Then he roared, "I hate them." Anakin began sobbing and slumped down to the floor. Padme knelt and put her arms around him. She said, "To be angry is to be human." "I'm a Jedi," Anakin gasped between sobs. "I know I'm better than this." And yet he also knew something else, something far worse than that he allowed himself to give way to his anger. Killing the Tuskens had given him satisfaction.